Hello everyone, this is Series Trivia, and today we're kicking off our ChiBi Let's Talk Lore series. This series will be a trilogy that covers the events leading up to, during, and after the famed Battle of ChiBi. The source material for this lore series will once again be the Romance of the Three Kingdoms novel by Luo Guanzhong, so this means the series will once again not be historically accurate. However, at the end of each part of the trilogy, I will conclude with a historical episode to reconcile the novel's material with historical facts, similar to how the Guan Yu lore series ended. Speaking of the Guan Yu lore series, if you missed that, I would highly recommend you to give it a quick watch before you start this series, as a lot of the story build off what happened during that lore series. With that said, let's jump into our story here. Our story begins in the fall season of the year 207 with Liu Bei. At the end of our Guan Yu lore series, we mentioned that after reuniting, the three Oath of the Peach Garden brothers headed south for Jingzhou to seek shelter under Liu Bei. Once they arrived, Liu Bei took pity on Liu Bei, since they are distant relatives after all, and are one of the few factions left still loyal to the Han Empire. So Liu Bei ceded over Xinye and provided Liu Bei a base to rebuild his forces. That was in the year 200. Now it's 7 years later, and Liu Bei has firmly established himself in Xinye. He has won over the hearts of the people and managed to recruit himself a decent-sized army. If we look at the map here, we can see that Liu Bei's territory is located at the northern tip of Liu Bei's Jin province and acts as a buffer state between Cao Cao and Liu Bei. Now, this was perhaps the reason why Liu Bei agreed to cede this land to Liu Bei in the first place, as Liu Bei also wanted to rely on Liu Bei's talented group of generals that included the likes of Guan Yu, Zhang Fei, and Zhao Yun to help him defend Jingzhou from the likes of Cao Cao. So clearly, Xinye wasn't located in a great position, but for Liu Bei, who has been drifting from place to place his entire life, a home is a home. And despite boarding Cao Cao, the 7 years that Liu Bei has resided here has been relatively peaceful, as Cao Cao has been preoccupied with campaigning against Yuan Shao in the north. However, this is all about to change. In the early month of the year 207, Cao Cao made the decision to launch his final assault against Yuan Shao's remaining two sons, Yuan Shang and Yuan Xi, who have now allied themselves with the nomadic Wuheng tribes in the north, following their father's death. By August, the two sides ran into each other at Bailangshan or White Wolf Mountain. Now, I mean it when I say they ran into each other, as both forces were marching through the mountain pass without knowing that they were headed straight for the enemy. When Cao Cao's force first spotted the enemy, Cao Cao thought they had ran into an enemy ambush and ordered his men to quickly turn and retreat, as the majority of his forces were still lagging far behind. As they turned to run, Zhang Liao noticed that the enemy were equally surprised and were also turning around to run. So he turned to Cao Cao and asked if he could lead Cao Cao's tiger and leopard cavalry units, which were essentially Cao Cao's elite bodyguard units, to charge at the enemy, who is clearly equally unprepared for this fight. Seizing this opportunity, Cao Cao agrees, and Zhang Liao's charge overwhelmed the enemy's vanguard forces, who now firmly believed that they had indeed ran into a Cao Cao ambush. As more and more of Cao Cao's men arrived to the scene, they routed the disorganized Wuheng tribal men and the remnants of the Yuan forces. Over 200,000 prisoners of war were taken that day, and the Wuheng tribe bent the knee to Cao Cao and never invaded China again until the civil war engulfed China during the War of the Eight Princes. Yuan Shang and Yuan Xi, however, managed to escape that day. The two of them traveled farther north to seek shelter with Gongsun Kang, but unfortunately for them, Gongsun Kang had no intention to go against Cao Cao and promptly executed both of the Yuan boys and sent their heads to Cao Cao. With this, Cao Cao has now gained full control of the north and now turns his eyes south towards Liu Bei in Jinzhou and Sun Clan in Dongwu. His first step was to send his cousin Cao Ren along with Li Dian and 30,000 men to garrison at Fancheng. If we return to the map here, Fancheng is located right here. It is situated at the northern bank of the Hanshui River, which overlooks Xiangyang to the south and Xinye to the east. Their mission was simply to scout out the strength of Liu Bei and Liu Bao's forces. However, once there, some of Cao Ren's overeager subordinates vastly underestimated the strength of Liu Bei's forces and lost a series of battles that resulted in the death of 2 generals and the loss of 5,000 men. Now let's be clear, Cao Ren is not a pushover who got his job through nepotism. He has been serving in the army since the initial Yellow Turban Rebellion and has scored countless victories in battles against the likes of Lu Bu and Yuan Shao. However, his past success is going to come to hunt him here as his pride got the better of him. Instead of remaining in Fancheng as he was ordered, Cao Ren decided to march his remaining 25,000 men across the river for a massive showdown with Liu Bei. When the two forces met outside of Xinye, Cao Ren showcased his military masteries and experience as battlefield commander as he organized his forces into a formation called 八门金锁阵. Now, as the name suggests, this formation is shaped like an octagon, with 8 sides, with each side being a gate. As much as it sounds like a fantasy, this formation actually existed in history, and is derived from the Taoist philosophy of Liangji and Bagua. It was designed to be a complex and dynamic formation that thought to trap and confuse opposing forces that dared to venture inside. Now, instead of me trying to explain this with words, let me show you instead with a short clip from the 1994 version of the Three Kingdoms TV show. Now, I know a lot of you have seen the subtitled 2010 version on YouTube. If you haven't and want to see the newer version, this battle is in episode 32, and I will provide that link in the description below. Now, I'm going to show you instead the older version here because I think the newer version overdid it and made the formation a lot more impressive with CGI than it should have been. So I felt this older version will be an actual better representative of what the formation should have looked like, so let's check it out. So, as you can see from that clip and in the game, having a strategist is very important, and the main rationale why the game Total War Three Kingdoms tied the formation system to your strategist rank. The strategist in the show here and in the books who helped Zhao Yun defeat this formation is a man by the name of Xu Shu. Now, Xu Shu's life is very interesting and often neglected in historical discussions, so we're going to talk about him for a little bit here, as he is the star of this episode. Xu Shu was born in Yinchuan, a commandery near the capital city of Luoyang. In his youth, he wasn't interested in books and did not plan on becoming a strategist. Instead, he trained to become a youxia, or a traveling swordsman. But his life turned upside down when he killed a man to avenge a friend's death and was caught by authorities. While on trial, his friends managed to break him out of prison and he escaped south to Jinzhou, where he gave up his sword for books and trained himself to become a strategist instead. During this time in Jinzhou, he also managed to befriend a few other like-minded scholars, including a young Zhuge Liang. But this is a story for tomorrow. All we need to know for this episode is that Xu Shu was drawn to Liu Bei's ideals to restore the Han and bring peace back to the land. So he sought out Liu Bei once Liu Bei settled in Xinye and has been serving as Liu Bei's chief strategist ever since. Now, Liu Bei really valued Xu Shu because while he has generals like Guan Yu, Zhang Fei, and Zhao Yun who have the strength to fight off 1,000 men, none of them were trained for warfare and lacked the knowledge to break a complicated formation like the 八门金锁阵. So, with the guidance of Xu Shu, Zhao Yun was able to break the formation and routed Cao Ren's army. You would think at this point Cao Ren would return to Fancheng and just defend until Cao Cao sends in reinforcement. But Cao Ren's pride couldn't allow him to accept defeat. Instead, despite warnings from Li Dian, Cao Ren tried to save face and decided to double down and gamble it all with a night raid against Liu Bei's forces. This turned out to be a disaster, as Xu Shu saw right through Cao Ren's intentions and set up ambushes to counteract the raid. That night, when Cao Ren's forces charged into Liu Bei's camp, they found no one inside. And before they could retreat, fire arrows came from all sides as Zhao Yun charged at their forces. With no choice now but to retreat, Cao Ren's forces ran all the way back to Hanshui River to try to escape back to Fancheng. At the river crossing, they were met by yet another ambush led by Zhang Fei. Cao Ren and Li Dian barely managed to fight their way across the river, but over half of their men either died fighting or drowned in the chaos. However, this nightmare of a night for Cao Ren was not over, as when they finally arrived back at Fancheng, they were greeted by yet another ambush led by Guan Yu, as Guan Yu's forces had beaten Cao Ren back to Fancheng and have already taken the poorly defended city. Seeing this, Cao Ren finally admits defeat and runs straight back north to cousin Cao Cao in Xuchang. When Cao Cao hears of the details of Cao Ren's defeat, he recognizes that Xu Shu is clearly a talent, and we know how much Cao Cao values talent. So naturally, Cao Cao asks his court if anyone has a plan to recruit Xu Shu for his own use. Now, just like in our Guan Yu lore series, strategist Chen Yu steps forth and claims that he knows a way. For those of you who have not yet watched the Guan Yu lore series, Chen Yu is often the one who come up with these crafty yet devious plans. Here, Chen Yu tells Cao Cao that Xu Shu is a well-known filial son who lost his father during his youth, so he's quite attached to his mom. All we need to do is invite or kidnap his mom, and he will surely leave Liu Bei and join us. To find out if Cao Cao actually goes with Chen Yu's devious plan, come back tomorrow as we'll continue our lore series.